At a campaign rally in Iowa last week, former President Trump said that the Civil War, quote, could have been negotiated. That was crazy enough, but then he said the Gettysburg Address could have been an email.
That's as good as it gets. That's the highest level of comedy in the United States of America. What are they? How many millions is that? They got that the writer's strike is over, right? Inexplicable. Inexplicable. That's what I'm telling you. Comedy at its most something. Nobody knows exactly. Don't want to work. Just want to bang on the drum all day. Well, happy Tuesday to you. Just one day away from Hillary Clinton waking up face down in a pool of her own dried vomit once again, crying about the fact that she's not president and she's never going to be. Although she's not letting go completely. Now she's going to have to carve her way through Joe Biden and maybe Michelle Obama. Michelle is on the loose, and she's terrified by what might happen if a communist doesn't take over the White House for another 4 years, hell-bent on destroying the United States of America, capitalism, and Western civilization. You know, the left. It's the internationalists. It's the Davos gang. It's the Gulfstream jet for me and walk around in moccasins for the crowd. You know, they all get on their Gulfstream jets and they fly to Davos and they sip champagne and eat caviar while lecturing the world about reducing our carbon footprints because, you know, let them eat caviar, as they say in Davos. Amazing stuff. We've got Michelle Obama. She was on the loose. She did an interview with some guy who, talks to people like Michelle Obama. Who, have you seen Michelle Obama's arms? Are those normal? Do you think that's a normal thing? I don't really think it is. She, as I understand it, this is a little known fact. She used to work as a tow truck in Chicago, which is where she got those arms. She can lift and separate 2-checker marathons. Those are old taxi cabs. Yeah. So we got some Michelle Obama for you today. Do we have any Hillary Clinton? I wish we had some Hillary Clinton today. Might have to conjure up some old stuff because, like you can be the best candidate, which she wasn't, and still have the election stolen from you. She's still going around saying the election was stolen, which is fine when you're a Democrat. You can say the election is stolen all you want. You just can't say that if you're a Republican because that's where you cross a line right there.
I don't feel no ways tired. I come too far from where I started from. Nobody told me that the road would be easy.
Nobody told her. Do you think she had hot sauce in her purse when she gave that speech about pretending to be some kind of black person or something like that? Hillary Clinton. These Democrats, they're not well. They really are unwell. We remain at 888-630-9625. 888-630-9625 is the telephone number here. And we've got all kinds of crazy for you because the Democrats are still off the leash. And Biden campaign is bringing journalists, New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, to Wilmington, Delaware, to sit them down and give them a little tutorial on how they ought to be reporting about Joe Biden and Biden's White House and Biden's campaign. And, of course, the vast majority of these so-called reporters, these reporters, I'm making quotation marks with my fingers, the vast majority are nodding in agreement and taking notes on how they could do a better job of advancing the international left. Honestly, the Biden campaign brings top journalists to Wilmington. This is Semaphore, not the New York Times, reporting that even though the New York Times reporter went there, but they didn't report on it because they're bootlicks and not journalists. They're not, holding government accountable or anything like that. They're fluffing Democrats. They need more chapstick. Protesters heckle Biden with calls for a ceasefire in Gaza. He was giving a speech. And, the crazy people showed up. They're all Democrats. And it was at a black church. And a bunch of people were asking early on, what are all these white people doing in this black church? Joe Biden's going there to fan the flames of racial discontent and racial division in America, as the Democrat Party has a long history of doing. And there are a bunch of white people in the crowd. And people are scratching their heads. Why all the white people? And a bunch of the white people had the front row seats. Do you see this whole bunch of them? A lot of the front row, this AAME Church that Joe Biden was using because it was the scene of a crime nearly a decade ago. So he's going to ignore all the crimes that have happened since then, but focus on this one crime because a white guy did it 9 years ago, but pay no attention to that. And Joe Biden is trying to racially polarize the country even further, which Barack Obama really got the ball rolling on that. Now Michelle, she's jumping in. She's going to do her part on that too. But the crazy pro-Hamas, pro-jihad, pro-genocide, pro-terrorist Democrats, they're all white. They stood up and started heckling and disrupting Joe Biden because the Democrat Party is struggling with mental illness. It's kind of tragic, really. It is. And they want him to get out. Michelle Obama says she's terrified about what could possibly happen. I think we're all terrified about what could possibly happen. That's a pretty broad sort of thing. Now she's got just a little bit of a taste, a little bit of a lick as to how most of the nation felt when her husband was elected president of the United States. Come on, terrified about what could possibly happen. And most of it happened because he was not very productive, but he did wreck healthcare, and, war is more likely, and the Iranians have nuclear-grade uranium and all that stuff, so never mind that. But Michelle Obama presses the panic button on 2024 election. That's she's out there, she's stirring up trouble. And a lot of people think that they're going to make her be the Democrat nominee when Joe Biden drops out. The Wall Street Journal prognosticator, the predictor of future events at the Wall Street Journal, because, they want to know where to invest their money. He said over the weekend that, or on Friday, that one of his predictions, his number 3 prediction for the year, is that Joe Biden will claim that he's got health issues and he will drop out of the race and no longer be the Democrats' candidate for the presidency. But that will happen after Super Tuesday, when he's going to be a lock, and and before Election Day. I've been saying pretty much the same thing for months myself, that Joe Biden will not be the nominee. And look out for Michelle Obama, because everybody will tell you, all the Democrats will tell you, oh, she doesn't want it. Their life is so great. Yeah, it's not really a matter of what she wants. She's not in charge of her life. She's not the boss of her. They'll tell her what to do and where to stand. They're the party. And they have their roots in Davos and other nasty places. So we got that. Also, a fun story, a congressman, a Republican from Montana, Matt Rosendale. It is good stuff. He's talking about impeaching. Who's he going to impeach? The Secretary of Defense. Where is the Secretary of Defense? Who is the Secretary of Defense? Former Army 4-star general, and Lloyd Austin. He's Secretary of the entire Department of Defense now, and he's been MIA. He's been AWOL. He is nowhere to be found. He's in the hospital, and it was just a little elective. What was it? An elective procedure. So what was that? A nose job, or what was he having? Nobody really knows. Ear reduction surgery, vanity project. What is that? He went in, no big deal, came home, and then a couple days later, he's being rushed to the hospital in an ambulance, to Walter Reed Medical Center in an ambulance. And that's not a good sign. He's a 70-year-old man, probably carrying a little more weight than his doctor would like him to be carrying. And he's in the hospital. He was in ICU for days, and they kept it a secret. Kept it a secret from the president, kept it a secret from everybody. It was a big secret. It was a state secret. And that's a fascinating story. And now Congressman Rosendale is going to introduce articles of impeachment against the Secretary of Defense for dereliction of duty and various other things, and I think that's great. Articles of impeachment being introduced against DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, and that's a good thing, too. They should all be fired. So I'll have updates for you on that stuff, too. It is lots of remarkable stuff. The radical left-wing extremist prosecutor in Atlanta, Georgia, in Fulton County, turns out she's boinking the guy that they're paying to hunt down and lynch Trump. And hundreds of thousands of dollars of taxpayer dollars going to her boyfriend and they're going to be part of the Trump lynch mob, and they're going on vacation together and apparently using, the money that they're paying him, taxpayer dollars, to go after Trump. And they're going to the islands and they're going on to all kinds of fancy places because, they're Democrats, and the Democrats they're struggling with mental illness. There's a lot going on. And it looks like she should probably be in handcuffs. She should be in that. And they run that jail down there that's as lethal as Devil's Island was at the peak of French occupation in South America. This story is a pretty amazing one. Fanny, old Fanny, she's really something. And she is dating, that's a euphemism, the man that they're paying hundreds and hundreds of thousands of taxpayer dollars to go after Trump. And she is dating him. That's an interesting development. She should be in handcuffs and thrown in that jail where, what do they have, like 3 people a month die in that jail or something? Honestly, it's a nightmare. It's like Andersonville, this jail that they run in Atlanta. But never mind that. That's a Civil War reference for Democrats following along. When the Democrats started the Civil War. I do keep waiting for the Democrats to fire on Fort Sumter again. You know how they are. Also, President Trump is due in court today. He's expected to appear in court in Washington, D.C. In fact, very soon, right about now, he's expected to appear in court in Washington, D.C., federal court, because the Democrats are planning on lynching him, political enemy that he is of the international left. And danger, pretty amazing stuff. So he's expected to appear in court today. And they're announcing it, the news media announcing he's going to appear there, which means you got to double up on security because crazy Democrats are out there. And you know how they are. They got itchy trigger fingers and they're all nuts. So I'll keep you posted on President Trump and court in Washington, D.C. Also in Los Angeles, they've got this crazy George Gascon. He is another radical left-wing, anti-American, anti-law, pro-criminal prosecutor, Soros guy, and George Gascon. And he's got a chief of staff. His chief of staff describes herself as a proud former looter. Why former? It's not over yet. You can keep looting all you'd like. You guys have legalized looting in California up to $950. Go ahead and keep looting, honey bunch, because, and none of them will ever go to jail because we live in what is effectively a third world banana republic at this point. Amazing stuff. Also in Washington, D.C., they have an advisory neighborhood commission, and there's a young man who was elected to the ANC, the Advisory Neighborhood Commission, and he's a convicted murderer in prison for murder, and he was elected to office in D.C. while in prison as a convicted murderer. And now the Democrats want to put this convicted murderer who was elected to an office in Washington, D.C. while in prison for murder because Democrats love murder. That's one of the things you got to know about the Democrats is murder is one of their things. It is their bag baby. But the convicted murderer is now the Democrats are looking on putting him on the sentencing commission. The sentencing commission. Because, who knows more about the subject than him? And the news media calls him a former convicted murderer. Michael, can you be a former convicted murderer? Maybe if you're exonerated, later you could be a former convicted murderer if the conviction is lifted, but that's not the case in this instance. He is a convicted murderer. The news media calls a former convicted murderer. That's like calling somebody a former ex-Marine or something. I was an ex-Marine. No, you still are an ex-Marine. But never mind that. And we got a kind of a fun, crazy thing at Tyson's Corner. Some Four Democrats went in and stole $4,500 in handbags. And something crazy happened. The police pursued them and captured them and arrested them. In D.C. and New York and L.A., that doesn't happen. The criminals just go away. But in Virginia, Tyson's, the police actually said, hey, why don't we arrest these people? And so they followed them on the highway and got the state police involved. And they arrested the criminals, which is pretty crazy. I know. We've got Eagle Pass, Texas in the news today, and also this crazy Alaska Airlines, the door plug that flew off the plane and things flew out the window, including people's cell phones. How did your cell phone fly out the window of the airplane when the door panel popped off? But never mind. Crazy story. The iPhone fell 16,000 feet. Somebody on the ground found it, picked it up, and it works fine. That's going to be a TV ad, I think. That's pretty amazing stuff. We got that. The Democrats, they love to rewrite history and tear down American history. The Democrats do, especially their own history, because they're all racists and always have been. But there has been a development in Pennsylvania, the statue of William Penn, that the Democrats in their Taliban-like way want to tear down. I have an update for you on that story from yesterday. And let's say you were a Chinese spy and you were caught spying for the Chinese Communist Party and you were convicted. How much time in prison would you get for that, let's say, compared to walking on the Capitol grounds on January 6th? I've got that coming up. And we're at 888-630-9625. Hey, it's Chris Plant, excited to tell you about our July 2024 Listener Sea Cruise. We'll be sailing around the British Isles, visiting Scotland and Ireland. Please join us. Visit ChrisPlantCruise.com. Yeah, I have Michelle Obama for you. She was on was that a podcast? Is that what that is? That's a podcast. Had you ever heard of that podcast? No, I had never heard of that podcast. And it's just another friendly media outlet where they put out a video of Michelle Obama saying outrageous things. And, the Democrat Party, their hyperbolic rhetoric is so over the top at this moment in time that Joe Biden, while he gives speeches that the news media gives him credit for giving a speech about unity and bringing the country together, while he doesn't know what he's doing, but his speechwriters and Barack Obama, they put together these speeches tearing the country apart along lines of race, along lines of class, along lines of gender, and gender, and gender, and gender, because they've got a lot of genders in the Democrat Party. Is it possible that he's more divisive than Barack Obama? Kind of impossible to believe. And then Donald Trump comes along and he makes fun of people. He makes jokes at people's expense. And the news media goes into a flop sweat panic attack like the door plug just flew off the plane. The door plug flew off the plane. But I've got Michelle Obama. I've got Michelle Obama for you and Joe Biden for you. He said some crazy stuff yesterday, too. And crime and no punishment. That's coming up. Joe Biden yesterday was, he's out there fanning the flames of racial division in America because that's what Joe Biden and the Democrats do. And he went to an AAME Church, right, black church, where there was a terrible massacre in 2015, which is now 9 years ago. It's not quite 9 years ago since the attack. The number of African Americans murdered since then, somewhere in the neighborhood of 80,000. That's not an exaggeration. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 80,000 murdered African Americans in the United States since this incident in 2015. Last year, well over 10,000 African Americans murdered, not all of them in Chicago, but a lot of them, not all of them in Washington, D.C., but a lot of them. We just had a 26-year high in homicides in Washington, D.C. Joe Biden is not expected to give a speech on that from any location in Washington because the Democrats don't really care about black lives. They care about black votes. In fact, the Democrats should have T-shirts that say Black Votes Matter. Shouldn't they? Black votes matter? Because that's what the Democrats care about, power and votes. And they will just keep the lie going forever and ever. The party of Jefferson Davis and the Confederate States of America, Nathan Bedford Forrest, Jim Crow. Orville Faubus Orville Faubus doesn't get enough credit for being a racist, segregationist Democrat. Standing in the schoolhouse door at Central High in Little Rock, Arkansas in 1957, right? Republican President Dwight Eisenhower had to send the 101st Airborne down to move his lard butt out of the way. But let me get to this, because this is a little bit of fun. Biden tells hecklers he's pushing Israel to significantly get out of Gaza because he wants to preserve, they're not conservatives, but the things they do want to conserve are things like radical Islam, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Iranian nuclear program. These are things that they'd like to conserve. They're conservatives when it comes to that. President Biden told hecklers at a campaign event Monday he's quietly pushing Israel to significantly get out of Gaza because he's got to jump in to save the genocidal anti-Semites of Hamas, making the disclosure just days after Israeli authorities moved to reduce troop levels in Palestinian territory. Now, here's Joe Biden, and he is at the Mother Emanuel AAME Church in Charleston, South Carolina, where 9 people were murdered in 2015. 9 people were murdered and more over several weekends in Chicago last year, not 9 years ago. But, Joe Biden, for him, a decade is like the blink of an eye. So pay no attention to that. And Joe Biden was there to divide. It's about divide and conquer. Everything with them is political. There is nothing but the fight. There is only the fight, as Hillary Clinton famously said, right? And she means it. Let's go to Joe Biden from yesterday. Now, this is pretty ridiculous and fairly typical of Joe Biden. Now, Biden said, and he mumbled and he murmured, but he seemed to say that either he started the civil rights movement or he started a civil rights movement when he was at the AAME Church yesterday. And none of that is true, of course, but it really doesn't matter because he's Joe Biden and he can say whatever he wants. And nobody's going to correct him in the news media. That's why it's good to be a Democrat. Really no other reason, but the news media completely leaves you alone. It's pretty amazing. The New York Post has the story. The Washington Post, the New York Times do not. Biden repeats civil rights whopper in a desperate re-election bid. That's the New York Post, their headline today. And this is a lie that he's told before, and it's been fake-checked before. And it doesn't matter. He does this all the time. He tells stories, they're fact-checked. They get a bottomless Pinocchio. That's like a bottomless mimosa at brunch. A bottomless Pinocchio from the Washington Post, which is a gang of Democrat Party bootlicks like Glenn Kessler and their fake fact-checkers that do the work and the bidding of the Democrat Party rather than of their dwindling number of readers. But pay no attention to that. Here's Joe Biden. He started a civil rights movement in Delaware because that's just the kind of guy he is. Keeping in mind, he's the guy that led the lynching of Clarence Thomas at the confirmation hearing. He was the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee at the time. And, of course, he's the guy who said he didn't want his kids. He was opposing racial integration of schools in Delaware when his kids were going to school. And he said he didn't want his kids going to school in a racial jungle, right? He's fine with the Senate office building, the Russell Senate office building being named for a racist, segregationist Democrat senator from Georgia, Democrat Richard Russell, should be named for Hiram Revels, the first African-American to serve in Congress, and he served in the Senate. But never mind that. And Joe Biden, he palled around with Robert Byrd, the exalted cyclops of the Democratic Party from West Virginia, who actually launched the first KKK chapter in the history of West Virginia, colleague of Joe Biden's, but pay no attention to that. Here's Joe Biden yesterday. He started the civil rights movement.
I've spent more time in the Bethel AAME Church in Wilmington, Delaware than I have than most people I know, black or white, have spent in that church. Because that's why I started. No, I'm serious. I started civil rights
serious.
movement.
Yeah, I started the civil rights movement. You did what? You started the civil rights movement, or you started a civil rights movement? Pretty amazing stuff, Joe Biden. He couldn't stop himself from claiming phony cred, insisting he'd spent more time in the Bethel AAME Church in Wilmington, Delaware than most people I know, black or white, because that's where I started a civil rights movement.
Because that's why I started no, I'm serious. I started a civil rights movement.
I started civil rights movement. I don't know if he has an A in there or the in there, but I started civil rights movement. That is an extraordinary and fatuous lie by this brain-addled nitwit living in the White House. Can you say nitwit on the thing? Pretty amazing stuff. Joe Biden. That's great stuff. He has in the past been forced to admit that he was not involved in any way in the civil rights movement, even though he is mature enough to have participated. He did admit in 1987, I was not an activist. I was not marching. I was not down in Selma. I was not anywhere else. That's true. He was not anywhere else either.
During the 60s, I was, in fact, very concerned about the civil rights movement.
He was very concerned.
I was not an activist. I worked at an all-black swimming pool in the east side of Wilmington, Delaware. I was involved. I was involved in what they were thinking, what they were feeling. I was involved, but I was not out marching. I was not down in Selma. I was not anywhere else.
Now, you were concerned. It's kind of like James Clyburn yesterday. What was it? I was not concerned, but I was very worried. I'm not worried, but I'm concerned. Right? That's a fine line right there. Joe Biden has also said all kinds of ridiculous things. He said he was raised in the black church, and he also said that in the synagogues in my state, he said that I was raised in the Puerto Rican community. He was raised in the synagogues. He was raised in the black church. He was raised in the Puerto Rican community. What a chameleon this guy is. He also said, I grew up in a Polish community. Maybe that's the punchline when he makes claim to all these other ethnic identities and backgrounds. And then the pun, no, actually, I was raised in the Polish community. That's why I got all this other stuff wrong.
Well, I'm not worried. I'm very concerned.
I'm not worried. I'm very concerned. I'm not worried. They use the words, but they don't know what they mean. Am I right? Pretty amazing stuff. Joe Biden, and he's such a chameleon. They're all chameleons. What did I say? Was he with Schumer yesterday looking like a lizard? Because, well, I saw Schumer yesterday somewhere, and his tongue was going out like a cartoon lizard, and he's got this creepy smile that looks like a scary Batman nemesis smile. The guy's nuts. All right, Joe Biden yesterday at the AAME Church in Charleston, because 9 years ago a terrible crime took place there, and a white guy did it, and that was 9 years ago. That's what they're looking for. Did he go to Waukesha, Wisconsin, when the black guy crashed his car into the Christmas parade and murdered 6 people and ran over 68 people? And the dancing grannies, did Joe Biden go there? Because that was a black guy murdering white people, a mass murder of white people. 68 run over, 8 killed, murdered, and the rest injured, and the dancing grannies. Did Joe Biden ever go there? In fact, the people of East Palestine, Ohio, with that train catastrophe, he promised that he was going to go visit East Palestine. He hasn't. It's like 340 days or something. And Raggedy Ann, cringe, she promised that he was going to go visit East Palestine. He still hasn't been there. Maybe it's not Puerto Rican or Jewish enough or Polish enough or something for him. Pretty extraordinary stuff. But here he is, because he wants to create racial division in the United States of America. Those terrible white people. Name a white supremacist crime. Where would we have to go for that? They said that 19-year-old that ran people over and killed Heather Heyer Charlottesville in Charlotte. That was Charlottesville. And he had been medicated as a teen, and he was a complete psychological mess, and he did murder that nice lady, and that was a terrible thing. Now, over the weekend, 38 people were shot in Chicago, but never mind that. Joe Biden doesn't go for that, because it's about seizing on that rare that rare item. A white criminal kills. Now, I mean, again, that was a white woman that he ran over. But then you got the black guy in Waukesha, Wisconsin, running, and he had all the anti-white hate stuff online before he ran over the dancing grannies and killed 8 people and ran over 66. Just amazing stuff. Joe Biden racially dividing the country yesterday at the AAME Church in Charleston.
On June 17, 2015, the beautiful souls, 5 survivors, invited a stranger into this church to pray with them. The word of God was pierced by bullets of hate, of rage, propelled by not just gunpowder, but by a poison that's for too long haunted this nation. What is that poison? White supremacy. Oh, it is. It's a poison.
Now, I told you yesterday, I shared the news stories from 2015, where Dylan Roof, the murderer in this case, was hanging out with his black buddies and drinking vodka a couple of days before, and they were best friends. They hung out all the time. And he said, a black friend interviewed BBC, I think it was, said that he never said anything racist, never thought his friend Dylan Roof was racist for any reason, and he had set out to commit a mass shooting at a college campus in Charleston. But when he discovered there were armed police on the college campus in Charleston, he called an audible and he went to this church 4 or 5 blocks away, and he murdered 9 people there, and it was a terrible tragedy. But his black friends say he's not a racist, and his initial target was not a black church, but a college campus. Never mind all that, but it wasn't a gun-free zone, so there were armed police on campus. We had a police officer on the show yesterday who was working in Charleston as a police officer and is now in our area. But never mind that. Just amazing stuff. Now, just dial Chicago weekend shot, first thing that pops up from 3 days ago. Chicago shootings this weekend, at least 8 shot, 2 killed in gun violence across city. All right, and that's perfectly typical. 3 killed, 17 wounded in Chicago during Christmas weekend. But is Joe Biden there giving speeches? Is he there talking about the race of the killers? Is he giving you only half the story when he goes to Charleston to trot out a 9-year-old crime? He's Joe Biden. Here's Joe Biden. And there were radical left-wing pro-Hamas, pro-Islamic terrorists, Democrats there, a bunch of white people in the crowd at the black church, stealing seats from black people. They're self-described liberals, and they're there chanting for more, genocide of the Jewish people.
The truth is under assault in America.
You're right about that.
As a consequence, so is our freedom, our democracy, our very country, because
you're right about that.
Without the truth, there's no light.
You're right about that.
Without light, there's no path from this darkness.
If you really care about the lives lost here, you should honor the lives lost and call for a ceasefire in
That's all right. That's all right. That's all right.
Ceasefire now. They love Hamas. They love jihad. They think they're liberals. They're glassy-eyed zombies. It's the zombie apocalypse. The Democrat Party is the zombie apocalypse. It's like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Now his supporters chant 4 more years because they want to shout down. And those are, the black people voting Democrat. Yeah, 4 more years because he's been so good. He goes around promising people free money.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ceasefire now. If you care about human life. They don't. Trust me on this. One thing they definitely don't care about is human life. Then at the end of the church service, did he ask them to all send a check to Planned Parenthood? Because the 40% annual elimination of the black population 400 out of every 1,000 African-American pregnancies, 400 out of every 1,000 terminated. And the Democrats give out awards for it with the name of a eugenicist on the award, Margaret Sanger, a racist. The Democrats live in a different kind of world. Oh, I've got Newt Gingrich today talking about that very thing as well. We're at 888-630-9625. I got all kinds of news. You know what swatting is? Swatting, you call the cops on somebody on false pretenses. Well, the Jack Smith special counsel was swatted on Christmas Day. I will explain. And it's all Trump's fault, which is the media lie of the minute. But in another minute, there'll be another media lie. So let's go to the telephones. What time is it? Let's go to William calling from Silver Spring, Maryland. William, you're on the Chris Plant Show.
Yeah, Chris, earlier you're bringing up about, the possibility the Democrats want to shove in Michelle Obama at the last minute. No one ever brings this up. This woman has never had an identifiable job in her entire life. She went to all her colleges for free on the public dole as a minority, but nobody brings that up.
Well, she is an extremely talented, brilliant woman who could lead the world without even trying. She went to Princeton. She went to Harvard Law School. She worked very briefly at a law firm, Sidley Austin, where she met Barack Obama, allegedly. But no, she worked at a college. She worked at the University of Chicago for a little while. External affairs doesn't mean anything, external affairs. Not much of a job when you just graduated from Harvard Law School and you went to undergrad at Princeton. But you're right, she's never really done anything. She complains pretty well, don't you think?
It's a shame, isn't it? But yet you get the average Joe walking the streets of America doesn't see it because MSNBC, CNN, ABC News touts a whole different image that people believe.
The propaganda apparatus of the Democrat Party. That's what information dominance is all about. And they use it to maximum effect on everything. It's one thing they're good at is propaganda. I've got that coming up. Michelle.